What's going wrong with Britain? Over 14 million people, including millions of children, are living in poverty, with more than a third of babies living below the poverty line. Many have been trapped in debt and hardship for years. According to research, the lowest 30% of households even experienced a decline in income. At the same time, partly thanks to Brexit, vacancies in adult social care are rising, with around 1 in 10 social worker roles unfilled. Adding to the problem is the complex and controversial all-in-one working age benefit system, which is meant to replace individual payments. Delays and confusion have created even more hardship and debt. All this has led to a surge in dependence on food banks, with users rising from tens of thousands to millions across a small number of years. At the same time, huge numbers of families now live in shelters, hostels, bed and breakfasts, refuges, and other social housing. And anyone who has walked through any British city recently will have seen the direct evidence of thousands of people sleeping rough in the streets. How can Britain take millions of children out of poverty? And could the controversial option of universal credit do any good? Simple questions with important answers. And let's begin with a question that gives us a real picture of the overall problem. How much can people in a working class or less wealthy area really save every month? We asked the public. Here's what they said.
It depends how able they are to find ways.
You've got rising costs, be it housing, which is a major issue. Your food costs, you just go look at what's happening in the food banks. So how can they save anything if they haven't got anything to start with?
We don't have council housing stock anymore, so rents have been going up and up and up. They have for years. So, no, it's, saving money is becoming, just becoming a laughable concept if you're, within a certain income bracket.
I don't think it's easy at all. To be honest, as a student myself, I try, I have to pay the bills, I have to pay for electricity, I gotta pay all that stuff, and it's quite challenging to,
We've got 4 children coming up to sort of university age, and just the basic cost of living, I suppose, really.
It is very, very difficult at the moment because they cut down on my pension, they have cut down on my literally everything. And then when you talk to them, they don't seem to care. And then they have taken the pension down recently.
I think generally people my age, I'm 18 as well, people would struggle to save money in this society due to the pressures on social media and what everyone else is buying and buying into.
Just mainly focus on providing for my children, and wherever I need I just leave it aside till I can actually afford it, which is basically never.
And a lot of people are preferring to go on benefits and even look for a job because they realise that when they calculate the salary that they would earn versus staying at home and collecting income support or whatever is better. So it is quite hard here.
I think what we're witnessing right now is something quite remarkable and something that we need to focus on in terms of the employment situation in this country. Theresa May just announced the other day that we have record employment rates since records began in 1971. But what she didn't mention is the quality of employment. People are on 0-hour contracts, short-term contracts. I mean, 60% of people in poverty today are in work. 2/3 of children in poverty come from households where there's at least one adult in work. So these are the things that we have to look at. We have to look at the type of employment offered and in terms of the wages, low wages is rampant. So precarious working models coupled with low wage is giving rise to this level of poverty that we're seeing today.
Firstly, I would agree with those numbers only because of it's the rise of the housing boom. So a lot of people is buying up houses but renting, and the only place where people can get a home now is not through the council, but it's by renting privately. So when they're renting privately, firstly they need somewhere to stay, so the rent will be sky high. Food is gone up. So, you know, for the sugar tax and to get a drink and, you know, everybody needs to unwind. So they might need to buy wine, they might need to buy cigarettes and things like that. And once they've seen on the end of the month, oh, their money has all gone. You know, they can't, you know, it's very rare to find a family that can maybe say, oh, let's put down £100 a month. Because, you know, a lot of people is just living day to day, working just to live, you know, day to day. So, yeah, that's like one of the main reasons why that is happening.
Millions of children live in serious poverty in Britain, while at the same time there are decreasing numbers of social workers. In the public's view, what more can be done to help tackle child poverty?
There is not enough structure padding, even if it is better than other places in the continent.
Well, in a way I can understand it if the government was saying, you know, you can only have 2 children and any more than that, or we will only finance 2 children. Any more than that, you have to basically find the money yourself. It might be a start.
You know, no child should be in poverty. It's as simple as that. You know, even if you buy into this concept of a deserving poor, which frankly we shouldn't anyway. I mean, the idea that, you know, that it's therefore okay for children who have done nothing to kind of be hampered with the sort of the, you know, sort of neoliberal version of original sin is just is a joke. Yeah, it's horrific that we think that's okay.
Having such a number still high, it's alarming, to be honest. The government should do something about it, even though they don't really care about the working class. It's just you know, the higher class.
The social attitude of a lot of people in this country has changed a lot. I don't think it's as fair as it used to be.
I think this is not warranted for, but I think this Conservative government is one of the worst governments there is. Because they have cut short the pensions, they cut short all the money for the kids.
I think just the social norms that are being pushed in our society as well is that's what's making it difficult for parents to actually bring their children into a world like this as well. You know, where there's so much pressures to be moulded and shaped by the society.
It's just so hard now to survive, to provide. Even I struggle with my children I'm a single mother myself. So I'm not surprised that children are going without food, going without the basic things really.
In a way, I'm not surprised because I do have a lot of like old school uniforms and old clothes that I do donate to charities and things, and they're always so happy and excited to receive it. So my mum was always saying that there's a particular group of people that they would even love this because school uniform can be really expensive as well. You can't afford good food for your children. You're always eating like the processed foods and the frozen foods and whatnot. So I'm surprised about this statistic, but I'm not too surprised.
You cannot blame that on bad parenting. I think people are under enormous stress at the moment. People are struggling, really, really struggling to make ends meet. They're dependent on food banks to put food on the table. They're choosing between heating their homes and buying food. They can't afford basic things like new clothes. I mean, we work closely with the NEU, which is the National Education Union, and the stories that they have coming back from teachers, you know, they have local supermarkets coming to school to leave out bread or unwanted food at the end of the day. Nothing is left at the end of the day. You know, teachers are buying provisions for the parents alone. You have got parents coming into the schools at breaking point, breaking down, crying, not knowing what to do because they feel so guilty, but it's not actually their fault. This burden has been put onto them by the government cuts to all of the services. So, you know, this responsibility that the government should be taking is now pushed to the individual, and the individual should not feel this guilt over something that the government's responsible for.
The main thing we could do is, you know, I've always said we need to bring back, you know, free school meals for everyone. We need to bring back milk. We need to bring back vegetables. You know, we need to encourage healthy eating, especially with young people, because the first thing a young person will see is, you know, is if I've got £5 in my pocket, I'm going to go chicken and chip shop. Was obviously firstly bad. Now, there's a lot of families that would depend on maybe government grants for maybe milk tokens. What used to happen was now stopped. So now they have to go and buy milk You know, I remember when I used to go shopping and buy milk, milk used to be 50p. Now milk is like £2. So how do you expect someone to have Cocoa Pops in the morning? You know, a lot of people having Cocoa Pops with water. It's not even Cocoa Pops. They're probably having the non-branded ones. You know, and especially with young people, you know, they're very embarrassed to say that they're not eating, and they would rather just go without.
Are universal credits a real solution to real problems? Here's what the general public told us.
I don't understand how it works. And if they don't make a provision to mind the gap between the two different things, I don't know how people can do that. I mean, they should have thought about it before. You know, like usual, who makes this provision is not poor people. So.
The idea might be very good, but if the execution isn't there, then obviously that will cause problems, especially when you have people who don't earn a lot to start with.
By lumping it all together and saying no one can earn more or less than this amount doesn't take into account size of family, you know, local conditions. London's a more expensive city to live in than somewhere like Hull. And allowing government to employ somebody like Capita, with their wonderful track record, to take on a project like that and stuff it up and not give them any proper oversight was just always asking for trouble.
Not at all. When you have countries like US and UK spending billions on military equipment and development, and there's like homeless people, you know, in the streets, that's the hypocrisy, you know. It's crazy.
To be honest, I don't know really that much about them. I'm not sure how they work, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that, I'm afraid.
I don't think so, because they'll take it from one side. You know, like when they give you universal credit, they'll want it back. So they have to recover it from somewhere.
I think it's effective. I think it is helping many people out there as well. But like I said, I think switching from tax credit to universal credit, I think many people suffered in this changeover.
You literally have to wait one whole month in order to actually get anything at all, and in that time you don't know how you know what's going to come up, the costs, so you have to literally, I'm conscious all the time as to what I'm spending on, how it will affect me, will I last the month.
I think maybe they should go back to the old ways that, you know, you have income support, you have child benefit, you have your job seekers allowance, so you break it down and you know what you have instead of putting everything all together. I think it's also confusing for a lot of people as well.
I mean, universal credit is just another austerity measure. I think the system that they're proposing and putting forward, which they are rolling out, is less generous by £3 million to the one that they're replacing, which tells you a lot about what they're doing. Having a 6-week delay, which I think they shortened to 5, which doesn't make much difference for the first payment, is really, really having a massive effect on people. People can't pay their rent, they can't feed themselves, they can't look after their children again. These are vital. One of the main benefits is housing benefit that's a part of this 6 benefit package. You can't pay your landlord, you're out on the street, and you know, all of these things. Universal credit is a symptom, it's not a solution, and it's something that should be stopped immediately.
Firstly, it's a double-edged sword. I can see what they're trying to do. I can see they're trying to make people more active, they're trying to make people more responsible. However, there's a lot of people who's used to being on benefits who's not worked for years. There's a lot of vulnerable people who's on benefits who don't know how to, you know, fend for themselves. Now, when you're getting benefits, you don't get that support. They just give you the benefit. But throughout the benefit, you also need to help the person to sort out. And there's a lot of people who's not used to seeing 1,000 odd in their account. And once they see 1,000 odd in their account, they will just blow it. When it comes to benefits, they're used to being on, you know, the most common is job seekers. With job seekers, you sign on a Tuesday, you get your benefits on a Friday. So on a Friday, you might get £122 meant to last you for 2 weeks. You might blow it on the Friday, but then you would have to then learn how to scrimp and scrape till you sign on again. Now, they want you to pay your rent, do your council tax, to do this, to do your gas, to do your lighting. But because they've given it to you at a big chunk, you're not expecting to say, do you know what, let me pay a big chunk to housing. you're thinking, let me buy some clothes, let me buy some trainers, what I'm not used to. Because me being on housing, me being on job seekers allowance, don't allow me to get trainers, don't allow me to buy clothes. And now I can actually go shopping and buy clothes. I will go and buy clothes, not knowing you're actually putting yourself at risk.
Let's look at the poverty facts. Between 4,000 and 5,000 people sleep rough in streets every night. According to homelessness charity Shelter, 320,000 people are homeless in the United Kingdom. The Trussell Trust is the largest food bank network in the UK. In 2009 to 10, it handed out around 41,000 food packs. By 2018, that figure had risen to over 1.3 million. Government figures for 2016 to 17 also show that 3.5 million children were living in serious poverty. We asked how many people have actually used a food bank or know someone who has.
I sometimes buy something and I put it in the food bank because I can afford it. So I prefer to do that than do charity on the street.
Basically, the state is relying on the generosity of its citizens to make up the difference. I mean, lucky for us, I suppose, is that generally speaking, the English are very generous and they see the problem. If that's the right answer, though, is another thing.
This notion of the big society that we're supposed to step in and, charity would take over from state, I mean, was always questionable to start with, and we decided that that's okay. This nonsense we weren't allowed to publicise them before, but why should we even need to publicise them in the first place? That's not answering that question. It's fundamentally wrong.
There needs to be change, and France is doing a good job with the revolution against the corrupt government, and I believe we should do the same.
No, I haven't, but I do understand that they have grown a lot. Even I actually live in quite a rural community, and even there, which traditionally probably wouldn't see things like this, they're now sort of starting to come around there as well, which again is not a very nice thing to see. So yeah, I understand that they're around, but no, I've never used them myself, no.
I think the people who are working, they get their wages. The people who haven't got money and hardly enough food for themselves, it's ridiculous to say that they're working and then they have to be looked after.
I think we as humans have a duty of care. When we see people out on the street, it's not for us to say, oh, you know what, if I don't do it, the next person's going to do it. I think we need to take responsibility and start having the individual impact rather than relying purely on charities and these corporations that are set up as well.
Well, I have thought about using a food bank myself at some point because I've got to the extent of becoming so desperate. But thankfully I haven't been pushed to that stage yet, but I'm not surprised.
Well, obviously, the country has no money. We're suffering in all areas concerned, even the people that are working, that are not working. It's just difficulties. Things are just really hard.
When Theresa May or the Tory government say record number of employment, it's the highest record of employment since 1971 when records began. This is absolutely ridiculous because, wages are not moving with inflation. For example, if wages moved with inflation since the records began, the average wage would be over £90,000 right now. People can't afford to live on poverty wages because that's exactly what we're seeing right now. You wanted to buy a house when records began, it was about £5,000. People can't afford to buy a house now. There aren't even social housing, they're being ripped off by landlords. And all of this goes towards the society we're living in. Food banks is another symptom of this. People are not being paid money. How do we get people out of poverty? We pay them more money. We give them more money. It's just not happening right now. So people are depending on the generosity or charity. And we should never let this be normalised. We should never allow this sort of Victorian type of charity to be something that is just part of our society. The government need to take responsibility back.
One of the main reasons why they are increasing is, again, mainly because of, loss of work, people finding it hard being on benefits and not knowing how to budget. People, simply is just losing money. But then the problem when it comes into food banks is you can't just walk into a food bank and get support. And that's one of the main reasons what we've done at the Bricks and Soup Kitchen is to have a food bank and, people can walk in off the streets, need support today, they'll get the support today. But our thing is not just about supporting you at all times, it's about what can we do for you to not get to that spot. And again, a lot of organisations they might have the facility to have them in, but don't have the solution. And what we're trying to do at the Soup Kitchen is to be more solution based, where we can give you shopping today, but what can we do for you to not come back in the nicest way possible? If that's you maybe being better with your benefits, doing your job search on time, doing your journals, getting into work, doing your CVs. So that's one of the main things what we do at the Soup Kitchen.
And now a central question. What's going wrong with the 6th largest economy in the world? What's going wrong with Britain?
We have to put money on things that perhaps it would have been better if it never happened, like a Brexit or armaments. It's instead of looking after our people. There is a lot of money invested in things that are not exact right for happiness.
If you find that a lot of people are leaving school with hardly any qualifications and not really, you're paying a fortune for university, which my question begs, why?
It shouldn't be about the size of our economy anyway. This is not a sort of this is not this shouldn't be some kind of phallic game about whether we are or aren't a big economy or not. This should be about how we look after this should be about how we have to look after our citizens, how we look after, our people.
When the government it's corrupt and it's all about getting rich and acquire more power, that's when there's no change, never going to be change unless the people rebel and actually elect someone which they think it's the right person to guide them.
I think it's disgusting. And I don't, as I say, it's not a very nice thing to see in this society. And I know that the gap has grown over the last 10 or 15 years through decisions that people have made, and it's not a very nice thing to see.
I think everything is wrong, the way they have set up things. And when the Conservatives come in, they undo what the Labour has already done. So it's a rat race between the two parties.
I couldn't say what's wrong with it, but I think it's just the system we've been subjected to. Many people like to talk about, it's the system. But I also think sometimes we as people have a responsibility to shy away from the system, to start saving our money, to start doing these sort of things so we're not caught into these traps as well.
They don't care, so they're not bothered. So that every year or every few years their funding is decreasing. People are becoming more frustration because the pay is decreasing as well. So
things are not being produced, but things are being taken a lot. And the whole Brexit thing is not helping situations either. Something needs to change, basically. There needs to be a big change, yeah.
We've seen 10 years of austerity being rolled out in this country, but that really only affects maybe the poor or the ordinary working people and the vulnerable people in this country. In fact, there is plenty of money. There's lots of money. The richest people in this country since 2010, they've seen their wealth increase by 183%. So it's not that there isn't money in this country, it's not being distributed. So we see the poorest, the most vulnerable and the ordinary working people of this country burdening the weight of austerity, and maybe indeed for the banking crisis that happened, which is one of the biggest excuses, I think, to oversee a massive transfer of wealth from the public purse, from taxpayers' monies, into the hands of privatisers and the wealthiest. So I think that what we need to do is we need massive systemic change. We need more trade union rights. We need to stop the attacks on the trade unions by this government also. People should join trade unions and fight for their rights more within the workplace. And I think a government change is probably one of the most necessary things, and a reversal of austerity policies.
I think the problem stems from higher up in the government. The government believe that they're doing the right thing. Now, what I've come to realize from definitely starting my own charity is that there's people who's very good at writing letters, writing reports, to get to the government to say this is the problem, what needs to be doing. but they're not actually good at actually doing the work. They're very good at the paperwork, but not good on the ground level. And that is what it's been like for centuries. Now, for small charities like Bricks and Soup Kitchen, who's very good at doing the actual ground-to-ground work, don't get the recognition from the government for the government to then say, here's a pot of funds, and this is what you can do to eradicate or to even lower homelessness around. And there's a lot of organizations that's very, very good at getting funds from the government, say, you know, they're gonna be ticking all the boxes and actually don't. So I think the problem always stems from the government knowing that they need to kind of come down to the grassroots organizations.
With over 14 million people living in some degree of poverty, the government's solution to this problem has become part of the cause. This has been compounded by the additional confusion over Brexit. The current political situation is also set to make matters even worse, with staff shortages in key social work jobs. The government claims that household incomes have never been higher, but nor has homelessness, rough sleeping, or dependence on handouts of food. Britain, the world's 6th largest economy, is facing a poverty crisis which cannot be hidden and has not been fixed. Far from being the kingdom of plenty, it looks like this has become the kingdom of poverty instead.